Yo, what's going on, Senpai Squad? Welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're talking about episode 123 of Boruto, and if I had to sum this episode up in one sentence, I think I'd have to go with a step in the right direction. Going off what you guys thought of this episode, I'm quite surprised if I'm 100% honest, because you guys have gone with a 4-star episode. 45% of you voted 4 stars, and that's actually the lowest rated episode we've had in this arc so far, albeit there's only been 3 episodes of it, so it's not a crazy deal. But I'm surprised, because in my opinion this was probably the best episode of the arc, so I was surprised not to see more 5 stars if I'm 100% honest. Saying that though, I think I'm going to agree with you guys this week. I think 4 stars more or less is good for this episode by Boruto standards. It was, like I said, it was definitely a step in the right direction. I'm going to go into what you guys had to say shortly, but I just wanted to say that I think the main problems with this arc so far, I think a lot of people can kind of come together and agree on, was that either the animation's not been great and the fights haven't been long enough. The action sequences haven't been long enough. I think the best animated scene we got was probably Yoshiki versus Shukaku and Gaara, but that only lasted for like a minute. In fact, most action sequences prior to this episode, and the last episode as well with the Kankuro, they only lasted a couple minutes maximum. And I think this episode being, I want to say it was more or less an entire episode of just fighting. It was a solid 15 minutes probably full of action in this episode, and that's why it's a step in the right direction. The one problem was that the animation still wasn't up to par for Boruto standards, in my opinion, which is shocking. I feel like I've said this every single review for this arc. The thing I've always praised the Boruto anime for, no matter how many times I disagree with the direction it takes, or an arc, or an episode, or whatever it is which I dislike that week, the one thing I've always praised it for is that the art and animation of this series is usually way above 7 out of 10. It's usually 7 to 8 out of 10, week in, week out. Even for the filler parts, like even the Mirai arc and the and that Remen arc, even that had some well animated moments. And now that we're in the big bad arc of the year, I was really expecting them to carry on from that. But so far, it's been quite stiff and dodgy, the animation sometimes, and this episode again was no exception. It definitely picked up as the episode went on, but it surprises me. I think that's the main thing. Anyway, let's jump into what you guys had to say and see if any of you guys agree with what I've said so far. So then Eternal Strike Gamer gave this episode a 4 stars as well, and said, I like this episode yet again. It's about time we got in a whole episode of fights. It was really interesting and built up to even more hype. I'm not giving it a 5 because the animation felt stiff at times, but I still enjoyed it. The last part of the episode got me pumped. Boruto has been on fire lately. I feel as though you've just summed up everything I've just spent the last few minutes saying perfectly in just a few sentences, and I think the animation was the big thing that let it down, because animation in fights, they sort of complement each other so damn well. Animation especially, I think animation is just what is the icing on the cake. It's just so visually appealing along with choreography, and I think the problem with having some stiff animation a lot of the time is it does take a lot of the immersion out of the scene, in my opinion. So any stakes that were potentially there, they're just not, it's not easily translated then to the viewer, in my opinion, when it's very stiff animation. It just makes it seem a little less serious. That's just a personal problem of myself. I do understand it may not be the same for you guys. That's why I like to know what your opinions on it is. And that's why I'm going to ask you guys this week your opinions on animation in fights. Is it that important? In my opinion, it's probably the most important thing along with choreography and emotion, but the animation can make or break a fight, in my opinion. That's one of the biggest things I have to say. Aaron Gwillan actually chips in and says that this episode should have been called Puppet Battle, and I was talking to a couple of people about this because this episode was called Yoshiki Returns. But he doesn't return until like the last 1 minute to 30 seconds or whatever of the episode. So it's slightly clickbait, if I'm 100% honest. Whereas the last battle was called the last episode even was called Puppet Battle because it was Kankuro fighting the puppets, and on paper that does make sense, but there wasn't actually much of that fight actually shown in the episode. It was split between that and Boruto and Shinki. So if anything, I almost feel like Aaron said, this episode deserved the title of Puppet Battle, and judging by the preview of next week's episode deserves the title of Urashiki Returns. So it's an odd one, that is. I'm not too sure why they've done that. I mean, I do understand it, but at the same time, I feel like those titles are better suited to the episodes that actually follow on from them. So we've got Trent and Dixon here saying that, honestly, my favourite part of the episode was seeing Shikadai use wind release again. I love it when the new generation use jutsu from both parents in combat instead of just sticking to one. We have it with Inajin, Shikadai, and now I'm just waiting for Chocho to use lightning release. And 100% again, I agree. I was waiting and watching this episode and just waiting for Shikadai to use his wind style jutsu, because I was actually going to rant if he didn't, but thankfully the writers didn't forget that one episode that they gave Shikadai where he showed that a new wind release. Some people potentially would call it a bit of a plot hole how he knew how to use Tamari's fan and he knew the sea sand dragon jutsu, whatever it was called, I can't quite remember. I do sort of sympathise with those people because I understand it. Now, I don't read much of the novels or any of that type of stuff when it comes to Boruto. I very rarely do dig deep into them unless they actually do come across the anime. But I believe, I want to say, Kryptonian Sane on Twitter actually said that he already knew that it was referenced somewhere, I believe, that Shikadai could use Tamari's fan. So maybe it's not as big of a plot hole as it is made out to be. However, potentially that's something where the writers could have picked up on earlier in the story. So I do sort of see where some people are coming from, but at the same time, I suppose it's a little indiscrepancy. I've messed that word up. With this episode, I don't think it's that big of a plot point or a plot hole or whatever you want to call it, but it's something to bring up for sure. Sticking on the topic with Shikadai and the wind release and Tamari, actually, I was really shocked when Urashiki just came in and just instantly took out Tamari and Shikadai. That really did raise the stakes. I mean, this guy has done so much damage so far with next to zero effort. I refuse to believe Urashiki has even tried so far in this arc. The only thing that seemed to faze him at all was Sasuke charging at him. That's the only thing that seems to have phased him at all this arc, and he dealt with it easily. So I'm excited to see what Urashiki's going to be like at the end of this arc, because I'm expecting a huge fight. We know he's got Mitsuki's Sage Mode. We know he's got some of Sasuke's chakra. We know he's got Gaara's chakra, Tsuneri's chakra. Maybe he'll get Shukaku's chakra. I really do want Urashiki to win by the end of this arc. But anyway, that's besides the point. I'm excited to see what type of form he takes up, because if he goes into some sort of like Rinnegan Sage Mode Susanoo form, I don't think Susanoo's particularly possible, because although he's got Sasuke's chakra, there's no Mangekyou Sharingan, but he does have a Rinnegan with 6 Tomoe. Maybe something, a little bit of plot hole can sort of be created there. I don't know. Maybe it's worth doing. It'd be interesting. I think the main thing I'm trying to get at is I'm interested to see what he can actually forge with all of this chakra, because the possibilities to create something never seen before in the series is very, very possible now with Urashiki's character. But with that, along with, like I was saying about Tamari and Shikadai getting knocked out at the end of the episode, that really did sort of raise the stakes for this arc so far. And like I've said in the thumbnail and the title, it's really getting serious now. It's really starting to get very serious. And I just hope that they keep this tone up. I'm just very, very worried that they won't. So far, this arc, I'm getting huge Mitsuki flashbacks. The feeling I've got with this arc right now in terms of excitement is very similar to the excitement I had with the Mitsuki arc. However, we've all lived through the Mitsuki arc now, and we know what they did. They made what could have been potentially a great arc down into nothing more but a good or okay arc because of the amount of dragging out that they did, and just necessity to introduce some childish slice of life type episodes with obviously that puzzle stuff in the snake cave, and then when they're in those wild plains with Inoki and the Mitsuki arc. And I just feel as though something like that is on the horizon in this arc at some point. That's my biggest worry. I think in the long run, when you're binging it, it's not as big as a deal, because like I've said, the Mitsuki arc, now that it's finished, I really actually quite enjoyed that arc, but watching it weekly, it was a pain. I remember ranting about it quite a few times during the airing of that arc, and I don't want to do that with this Yoshiki arc, but I feel like I might. And I feel like purely for the fact that Urashiki's the main antagonist in this arc, it's sort of, I don't want to say blinding some fans, because you're entitled to like what you want. That's nothing wrong with that at all. I encourage it. But I do feel like if it wasn't Urashiki and it was someone completely different, someone completely brand new, not an Otsutsuki, I really do think that some people would, and I already know some people are actually disliking this arc so far, but I feel like if it wasn't an Otsutsuki or not Urashiki, then there'd be a lot more people disliking this arc. However, and the potential is most definitely there. I think when the new opening airs beginning of October, I think that is going to when the arc really takes off, because I don't think they're going to show too much in case they do an actual accurate opening this time. They'll want to save some of those surprises for the opening. So I think maybe, I want to say it's around 127, 128 that we get the new opening. So I think around about then we might see a certain shift in the arc for better or worse if they do an accurate opening. If the Yoshiki arc is still airing during that opening and they still make a fake opening, then I honestly give up. I genuinely do give up on Boruto openings anymore if that's the case. But I think that more or less covers what I wanted to say about this episode. As always, if you guys have anything to say, just leave them in the comment section down below. As always, leave a like on the video if you did enjoy. Subscribe if you're not already to become a member of the Senpai Squad. It'd be incredible, absolutely incredible, if we could hit 3k by the end of the year. It's a huge ask, I know. We're still a few hundred away from it, but if you want to help me out, then that would be fantastic. I'll be seeing you guys in another video as always, but until then, peace. 執着の地獄がす寡黙なものをおびき寄せられた神々の化身恐れを知らぬ剣が貫く目指す場所とはまだ見ぬ定め近づいてくる決戦の時